Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to today's discussion on event sustainability. My name is Sarah O'Neill. I'm the Senior Director of Marketing here at M&IW, and I will be your moderator for today. I brought along three incredible panelists that I'd like to introduce to you. First up, we have Donna Collins. She is a sustainability champion here at M&IW and winner of VTN Group's 2025 Business Travel Sustainability Award. We also have Paige Lowe. She's the VP of Customer Success at Copia, which is the leading technology-enabled food surplus recovery service. And finally, we have Marley Finnegan. She is a founder and educator at Purpose Sustainable Event Strategy and the group travel emissions calculator Purpose Net Zero. So welcome, ladies.
Thank you. Good morning.
Yeah, so glad to have you here. It looks like based on the survey, we've got a pretty good working knowledge of event sustainability. So I'm expecting a pretty robust discussion here. And I think we will derive some pretty interesting takeaways for our audience. But speaking of, this is really an interactive session. So put your comments and your questions in the chat. This will help guide the conversation around important key takeaways for you. We want this to be about things that you're interested in, things that you can take and apply in your daily lives in your workplace. Next, I want to give a quick shout out to Veronica Ferguson and Casey McFalls. They are doing the behind the scenes thing. They're keeping things running smoothly. They're keeping us all on track. They're keeping the StreamYard streaming. So thank you both for being here. You've been a great help already, and we just appreciate your time. So listen, I'm going to just jump right in. I'm going to start with you, Donna. What can you tell us about the why behind sustainability being such a core focus at M&IW right now? And more importantly, what do you think our viewers can learn from that in terms of really leaning into event sustainability in their company or perhaps their role?
Thank you, Sarah. Well, if we haven't met yet, my name is Donna, like Sarah said, and if you've heard me talk, you know that I'm very passionate about sustainability, and that has extended throughout M&IW. It is a core value that was here long before I became the sustainability champion, and we prioritize sustainability because we have one planet, and we are doing our best to do what we can for our planet, for our people, and for our communities. And we really understand that we're expected to lead with purpose and responsibility when it comes to sustainability. And we're focused on two things: meeting where you are at on your sustainability, and then moving the needle forward on the scale of sustainability. Bottom line, we're here to really try to help you connect the dots between your sustainability goals as a company, whether you're a big company or a small company, a supplier or a planner that works for a corporation. We want to connect the dots between your sustainability statements and what you can do every single day.
Great. Okay, let's get into the topic is facts, future, and fiction, or facts, fiction, and future. So let's start with the facts. Let's really ground ourselves in the basic. The fundamental premises of sustainability. When we say event sustainability, what does that really mean? I mean, there's a lot of jargon out there, but there are also really powerful truths. So Marley, let's start with you. How do you define sustainability in the event space?
Thank you so much, Sarah. I think that before we get into sort of the foundational aspects of what sustainable event strategy encompasses, it's really important for us to address and acknowledge that I think sustainability needs a rebrand. Everybody in our industry and really the whole world has a perception of what sustainability means. And whether that is true or not is completely relative to the person. But first of all, it is not a trend. I hear that very frequently, that it's trendy, it's coming back. 2008, it was a trend. It is a true investment in innovation for the longevity of your business. Scientists have been talking about the critical urgency of addressing our business-related emissions and the concept of the climate crisis for many decades. And so it's really important to understand sustainability is not something that you wedge into your business model as usual. And it's not just like a profit mechanism. It is imperative that all areas of industry, including the events industry, really innovate to support a more conscious future for many, many reasons, but really for human and planetary well-being, of course. So the best thing that anyone can do right now is to educate themselves both on how this shows up in your personal life and how it shows up in your career and in your business practices. The second thing I want to highlight is that it's essential we acknowledge how highly psychological this is a complex psychological issue. And I want to tell a little story. I was invited to join the Society for Sustainable Events this January in San Francisco. I was on stage with an amazing couple women in Renee Lertzman, who's a renowned climate psychologist, and Alia Kanzo, who is the sustainability director for the Golden State Warriors. And up on stage, I was learning in tandem. And really, it was about well-being and mental health relative to this work. And I shared a story about my own realization of being in a deep bout of climate grief this past fall. October was probably one of the hardest moments and points of my life. I had just advised the Democratic National Convention on their sustainability initiatives, and that was hugely successful and really beautifully impactful. But I found myself basically in anger. The stages of grief are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally acceptance. And I was back and forth between anger and depression. And it was because I didn't feel that I was making the impact that I really intend to make with the work that I do. And also I was associating a lot of my value with my bank account and with my business outcomes instead of the value of just what I bring to the world as a human being. And it was really distressful. But, in sharing that story, I had so many people come up to me after, so thankful and grateful for that reflection. And, the other aspect was Renee has this amazing, she has a lot of really beautiful educational tools about empowerment as to how we have these conversations. And her education talks about either writing as in like finger wagging, telling people what's right, cheerleading, or educating. And essentially all of this is about mirroring the urgency that we feel inside and trying to project it on others so that they feel the same urgency that we feel. And I've been really guilty of that in my work. So I was learning that on stage, but it's really about being a guide and asking questions and being curious and really connecting in our humanity and our common empathy about why it is that we do care. Because everyone really, statistically speaking, 90% of the world, over 90% of the world cares deeply and is really concerned. So how can we build bridges of common humanity to these people and the people that we work with, our stakeholders, our leaders, around our mutual care? And there's always ways in which we can kind of find that path. And finally, I just want to acknowledge, really getting back to sustainable event strategy. I like to teach about this hyper simplification of emissions impacts and how they relate to what we do. So emissions impacts globally can feel a little bit outside of the scope of our work, but really travel and energy are the two largest emissions impacts typically for large scale, conventions, business meetings, and the like. Then I like to teach about sourcing. So sourcing materials, what are the distances, who are your vendors, and really designing out, unnecessary waste. Food, what are your food choices that you're making? What are you putting on the menu? What are the distances this food's coming from? And then food rescue as a critical and standard procedure. Finally, waste. So incorporating multi-stream waste diversion, thinking about your water impacts. And then finally, even though this is not emissions related, your social impacts. How are you integrating within the community, and how are you bringing and lifting up those voices?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if I could just say one thing, Marley, thank you for sharing your story, because you're so vulnerable in sharing that you were learning from the stage. I've taken the stance of, I just haven't learned that yet when it comes to all of this stuff that we're supposed to be expected to know about sustainability. And if we just say, I just haven't learned that yet, it takes the pressure off of all of us to be perfect. We don't have to be perfect. We just have to continually want to learn and just move it forward. So that's a great example, Marley.
Thanks, Donna. And I really feel like one of my favorite things is in life is learning. There's such a plethora of knowledge waiting for us always. So there's no shame in admitting that we don't know something. And I think that's a big kind of a part of our psychological challenge with this.
Yeah, it's important. Stay vulnerable, stay curious. It's okay to be both in this setting, certainly. And I know that has really carried Donna forward at MNIW in not only learning on a larger scale, but connecting with both of you and then bringing that information back to all of us at MNIW. So I think really excellent points from both of you. Paige, I wanted to ask you, Marley, you had mentioned, food and empowerment. And I wanted to ask you, Paige, just based on that, what have you seen in terms of small changes that have really driven big results within this food space and sustainability?
Yeah, so I also love that you're bringing in the psychology of it, Marley, because I know it can be overwhelming when you're thinking about the grief stage and how to manage this, but also it's ultimately behavior change, right? So when you're thinking about this, and I know it sounds like everyone's at maybe a slightly different level of your journey in sustainability and trying to help tackle event sustainability, and it's overwhelming. Sustainability touches so many different aspects of what you do in a day-to-day, what your colleagues do in a day-to-day. So really, at the end of the day, we have this common goal. Break it down. It's like with any other task, break it down. Find one, maybe two things that you do. Look at your counterpart, maybe involve your team and challenge them to do the same. Ask questions. I love what Donna and Marley were saying, because this doesn't have to be preachy or you're telling people how to do things. The data in the world of sustainability is changing and evolving day by day. So we're all learning this together. We're a community and supporting, figuring it out and finding the best solutions. So take that task. If you're already on your journey, one thing is also to help to celebrate the wins, even if it is something small. You'll be surprised at how quickly these little changes add up. I know, start documenting. Measurement is huge, especially if you're looking to build a case study and get executive buy-in. I think people who are at companies who have that executive support, it is wonderful, fantastic. This is where we're heading, but not every business is there yet. I mean, Donna at MIW and Marcelo, who we work very closely with, are incredible at taking the lead and pioneering this, but not everyone's there. So document everything, your progress, what's working, how you can have something that's scalable, because if you're successful in taking this initiative, how can you replicate that success? I know specifically for me, because Copia's focus is on food waste, and I'm not sure who has heard of Copia, but we are the fully automated donation platform, minimizing waste, maximizing profits. There is a financial benefit to donations too, and helping to make it all scalable and streamlined. So this process is critical. And why I bring up food waste and why we're even talking about this and have a company that's talking in the sustainability space is because food waste is a huge contributor to methane gas emissions, which is a powerful greenhouse gas. If food waste were a country, it would actually be the third largest emitter of greenhouse gases behind the United States and China. So huge problem today. And what you think about for donations is sometimes you're like, okay, it's an event, let's say you have a 3 to 4 day event, right? I'm serving 3 meals a day. It's only like 10 pounds per meal. It's really not that much. is it worth donating? If you think about it, 1 pound of food donated equates to 3 times that amount in diverted carbon emissions from landfills. So when you think about that, just 10 pounds per meal, or maybe about 30 pounds a day, this ends up becoming a huge amount when you aggregate that. So when you think about small decisions that end up making a big impact over time, this will end up diverting the same amount of emissions as it would take to drive from Phoenix, Arizona to Los Angeles, California. And that is just if, let's say, you have a 3 to 4 day event. And if you don't know that distance, I don't know where everyone's located, it's like a 6-hour car drive. So it's not nothing. It's pretty significant when you're driving there.
Yeah.
So it adds up. It might be hard. And the other thing too is that this food is going to people in need and the humanity of it. And to be able to give back to that community where you're hosting the event is huge. And for these nonprofits to be able to get this beautiful restaurant quality meal is such a highlight to them. Yeah. So that aspect is also really important. So I touched on a lot, but even though you might not think it's a lot or it might be overwhelming, take note, make little steps, and it'll have a big impact eventually down the line.
I know, Marley, you have a story about that. I want to get to that, but I wanted to comment, or I wanted to take a look at this comment. Biggest challenge. Many times we see that although us as a hotel supplier is offering extensive sustainability options, the client is not necessarily ready or they're in their own sustainability process and therefore go for the more comfortable way, old way of executing their events. I mean, one of you, maybe Donna, I know you probably have experience with that. And I know that you pull in Marley and Paige to help justify, you know, the additional efforts. But how would one of you, you know, take this question and address that?
I think I would love to talk about the fact that Copia's model.
I just think that, you know, we need to be a broken record. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Marley.
We might have a little lag there.
Sorry, I was just going to say, Copia's.
I think we just need to be the broken record as sustainability. All right,
go ahead, Donna.
I think we just need to be the broken record and just keep telling the sustainability story. We just need to be the broken record. We have buying power, like you mentioned earlier, Marley, and we need to keep telling the story of why it's important. Collecting the data, putting it in a format that the leaders and the companies will listen to. If they don't listen to it, keep on doing it. We are the leaders. We are the broken records when it comes to sustainability. We just have to keep pushing that needle on the scale.
Okay.
Go ahead, Marley.
Yeah.
Zeroing in on food rescue specifically, I've worked with a number of clients, including the Democratic National Convention, and it's about business model innovation. So Copia has really predictable pricing where you can actually put this into your proposals. You can make this a part of your model. You can charge and actually create a little bit of a new revenue stream. And you can also provide all the data associated with those emissions avoided from landfill and the people fed in your community. So, you know, it's a smart business decision, but also it is something in which you can build in predictably. And with us standardizing this type of thing, we're being proactive rather than reactive. And a big thing for me, having been in the industry for 20 years, you know, in 2008 and again in 2020, you know, of course, we haven't had a lot of choice. But what I hear over and over in terms of these, you know, these big times of risk and where our industry has really had a lot of trauma associated with it is, you know, the clients aren't asking for it. The client isn't asking. The client doesn't know. But if we are the expert and we're leading with this, and this is a standard part of our operating procedures, we are the expert on their behalf. And we can do a lot of these things, you know, without adding extra costs necessarily. So I think it's about really leadership in a proactive sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it gets back to that. It's not a trend, it's an investment. And proving that out over and over and over again. And fortunately, with companies like the ones you're both involved in, we have accessibility to those tools to be able to prove out that investment. Okay, I want to switch gears into myth busting. We have a lot of half truths. We have a lot of things that, people say. I know one that's pretty big, but Paige, you've seen how firsthand how misinformation can really create hesitation, and we just talked about that. But talk to us about the big myth you'd like to put to rest.
Yeah, I really quickly before I dive into this, and I know I'll be quick on this. Even though, of course, as planners, you want to have a predictable model, we know that waste is not predictable, and that's part of how Gopia works. So it's not like you're planning to have 5 pounds at the end of the night. That's part of also how we work to make sure that you're diverting as much as possible only when you have it. But something that comes up a lot, and oh my gosh, I want to say like almost weekly, if not more, is I'm not going to donate. I'm going to be held liable. Someone's going to sue me if my food gets someone sick. It's a very good concern to have, of course. But I do want to say that you are fully federally covered. This is not true. I'm busting this myth right here. This has not been true for the past 30 years. The Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act was passed in 1996 and establishes federal protection from civil and criminal liability for donations made in good faith to those in need. So there has not been a successful lawsuit against this. You are covered. This is something that we are educating constantly to venues and planners to help make sure that they have that ammo to be able to get on board with donations. These protections are even further extended recently in the past few years with the Food Donation Improvement Act. So if anything, there's more legislation adding to this and helping to add additional protection. So you are fully covered. I think we have a lot of planners on this call, but in case there's also venues listening, I do want to quickly touch on another myth that I hold near and dear to my heart. A lot of people, about 80% of Americans waste food because of date labels. This does not mean anything. It is not federally regulated unless it's baby food. But otherwise, anything else, it's usually manufacturers who are putting these labels on products. So please look at the date. You can look at it, but it doesn't mean anything. It's the sniff, the smell test, check to make sure it looks okay. There's a wonderful app. It's the USDA Food Keeper app that helps say freeze items. Maybe you should donate it. Maybe you should share it if it's at or close to or just past expiration. That's a great gut check. And I really encourage you to use that to help reduce what we're wasting today in our footprint.
And isn't it true, just getting back to the liability issue, that most everyone in the kitchen at the place that is helping you pack up, they're all food safety certified. I mean, most of them are. I don't want to create my own myth here, but in order to work in these kitchens on such a large scale, they usually generally have to be food safety certified. So they're doing it in the safest way possible, really.
Yep, absolutely. If you're working in a commercial kitchen, you should definitely be, I would hope, food safety certified. That's definitely something that everyone there should know about time and temperature control and making sure it's managed in a food safe way.
Donna, what is something that you hear often that you think could use a reality check?
I think the myth that's out there is that I don't have to act now because there's no regulations that are really demanding that I do. And to that, I say, well, if not now, then when? And I think that really the best time to act was probably decades ago, but really the best time to act is the next best time to act is right now. And should you stop wanting to be sustainable because you're not being held accountable for it? Absolutely not. We are the voice, we are the leaders in the industry, we're all speaking the same tune. We need to tell the story. How much food are we sharing? What is our carbon footprint of the energy we use in the venues? What about, our travel? Start to tell the story of what we're doing. Don't stop because you're not being graded or you're not being held accountable. You have to keep moving forward. And, regulations that aren't mandatory, well, while in the United States, the Security and Exchange Commissions for Scope 3, their measurements have stalled, and the political climate maybe has put the brakes on some things. But in the European Union and in California, things are still moving forward. So why wait to be asked to send in a report when you should be just doing whatever you can do now to measure? So we're ready, and we're ready. We can measure what we're saving in terms of food and what we're doing in terms of carbon footprint of venues.
Yeah. Great idea. Great statement there. And we have a question in the chat. Are there similar protections like the Good Samaritan Act in other regions like APAC and EMEA? You had just mentioned the European Union. Do you want to speak to that, or do you have information on that, Donna?
I know
Marley,
personally.
do you want to?
I was going to say, I know personally from doing some international events that it really does vary by country and by region. And I know like the UK and different places in Europe have very different and sometimes really stringent legislation on food donation. I am not personally 100% knowledgeable on those, but I do know that they vary. And I think the ones I'm very familiar with are that the US based donation is completely and through the whole food chain protected.
Donna, you had mentioned something about Europe moving forward. Did you have thoughts on that one?
They're moving forward with scopes 1 and 2, and the meetings and events industry falls into the scope 3. So we can take a look and watch what's happening in terms of reporting for scopes 1 and 2. But until they come up with specific ways that we need to report on scope 3, you know, it's just time will tell. Again, why wait until you're demanded to give a report? You know, measure the footprint.
Yeah. Marley, you had referred to this earlier about sustainability being more expensive. Sustainability creates more expense. That was also a myth in the chat. Do you want to address that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really, there are destinations proving out the investment in things like solar and renewables and innovation around buildings really in the long run. The thing about fossil fuels is that they are highly, highly subsidized by the government. The actual cost to use fossil fuel energy is highly, highly expensive. And renewables have really taken on a really competitive, if not lower, price point. So if you invest in solar at your house or at your venue, in the long run, you are going to be cash positive. And that's just one example. But for example, with your menu choices, if you switch to entirely plant-based, you will save enough money to be able to donate your food, to be able to possibly implement composting. And also just the sheer idea of buying things, consumption. If you're buying a bunch of swag or you're doing a bunch of fabrication and doing all these different things, when really you could really minimize and bring in a local artist to curate an experience for your cocktail hour versus having this built, you know, set. There's so many ways that you can be creative. And I think that's where, you know, we really like to kind of tag on these ideas and stereotypes with this work. And frankly, I think that's actually part of my myth is that, you know, sustainability is boring or granola. It's actually innovation, it's creativity. And, you know, the other thing that I think associated with the psychology of it all is that what we don't understand is that everyone the world over, again, is aware of this, is concerned about it. So when we are acting positively and consciously within our business practices, it's sending a subconscious or even conscious message to our employees that we care about them. We care about their mental health and well-being. And a great example is at the DNC, we had 1,000 volunteers and we had a group signal chat, and the outpouring of love from these people and pride after their participation in educating people about compost and recycling and food rescue and all these amazing things. I mean, they felt incredible. And it was the biggest aha moment for me to realize this is about people. You know, this makes people feel good. So the other aspect I wanted to sort of mention was the myth of the unseen versus the seen emissions. So things that we don't see are our travel emissions. We don't see our energy emissions. We don't see the sourcing of fabrication materials that come, all the way from across the globe. We don't see where the fabrication stage set goes and the vinyl goes afterwards. But those are all emissions that add up to the environmental impact. And the other thing we don't see is the community, the positive community impacts or the mental health impacts of our people. So how can we address, oftentimes planners will look at what the attendees see, like the waste, the plastic, those types of things, when really we have to take a more holistic approach to these unseen emissions as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent point. The seen versus the unseen. It's, really easy to get caught up in the things that we have changed and just keep going with, our banners and our signs and, tossing those at the end. I wanted to talk about a question here that I saw pop up from an item perspective. What units of measurement are most important and impactful from an item perspective?
So I'm going to kind of take a swing at this one, if that's okay. I think that a good tip is, if you aren't sure what your impacts are, you haven't measured your event-related emissions or your organizational emissions, think about what your biggest expenses are. So if your biggest expense is your hotel, or it's your food, or it's your fabricator, then those are likely where a lot of your environmental impacts will fall. But in terms of measurement, there's so many things that we can measure, but the way that emissions are measured is in metric tons of CO2 equivalent, CO2e. It's carbon equivalent, but it basically takes in all different gases that are trapping heat within the atmosphere and makes it into one collective measurement term. So I hope that is answering that question.
I also want to jump in quickly on that. It really depends who you're talking to. So if you're talking to your sustainability leader, your goals as an organization, carbon equivalent emissions is probably one of the routes you want to go. But to Marley's point, if you're trying to make a case to your CFO, you probably want to put a dollar sign in front of that and say, this is what our savings is going to be, and this is what this is going to cost. Whereas to a client or someone you're hosting an event with, you probably want to break that down into something, because they might not know what X pounds of carbon equivalent emissions are. So it really depends who you're talking to frame that up in a way that makes sense.
Well, and page 2, we rescued with Copia 27,000 pounds of food for the DNC in a week, which fed 23,000 Chicagoans right in that small area. So also talking about the people that you affect positively is really important too.
Yeah. Donna, what do you find is commonly requested in terms of units of measurement, or how do you convey that to clients that might be asking about it?
Well, we follow the 5 main event emissions: travel, energy, suppliers, food, and waste. So what's the carbon footprint of your event and your venue? How much food are you donating? How many plastic, we're asking our planners to tell us, how many single-use plastic bottles are you not using that you used last year? So the different ways of measuring all depend on what, what your leaders want to hear. So we have to be creative in collecting as much information we can. Like I said earlier, we can't move the needle on the scale. Well, we have to, first of all, get that needle on the scale. So what are we going to measure? The amount of food that we're donating, the amount of single bottles. Get the needle, figure out what the needle is on your scale in your venue and for what you're doing.
Yeah. Okay, I wanted to stop here. We've had some great questions. Veronica, I don't know if there were any other questions in the chat that you wanted to pop in here. Yes. Okay. So what are some top sites or resources that planners or hoteliers can access to get more informed and to plan better? We'll just go around the room. Donna, we'll start with you.
Oh, there's just so many. I sign up for as many sustainability newsletters that you can from different perspectives. I get them from hotels, I get them from food sources, I get them from DMCs, I get them from thought leaders on sustainability. So I listen to all of it and try to read everything that I can. I don't think there's just one. I think you need to have different perspectives when you're thinking about the whole picture.
Paige, I'm going to
Yeah.
mute because my dog's barking. So
No worries. Yeah, I agree. There's so many different resources now. I think it's hard to say that there is one like tried and true source that holds everything, and that's what you should go off of exclusively. There's so many different sustainability communities too that you can ask questions, bounce ideas off of in different groups. I know one of the groups that we help with events is Green Biz, now Trellis. And that's a great group of people who are just really driving the needle, making sure that they're making change. And they have a lot of great ideas in terms of events of who to source, who to go to. There's a lot. I can think of a lot of people off the top of my head. So start tapping into that community and your network will expand quickly.
Mm-hmm. Marley, I want to get your input as well, but I do want to mention that we have a great resource PDF that we will be sending out after the event. So I think we have some really, really amazing resources listed on there. So stay tuned for that. But Marley, what are your thoughts?
Definitely, not to toot my own horn, but there will be a lot of resources from me coming your way. But two other places that I find to be really, really influential is there's an organization called ILA in the UK, and they are the creators of Trace, the emissions measurement software. They do a ton of education, and they provide a number of free resources. And also, I supported PCMA in the creation of their first sustainability course, which is launching relatively soon. But through that work, I was able to also support Destination Canada with some of their initiatives, and realizing that their destinations are really ahead and doing some amazingly innovative things, including Ottawa has standardized food rescue municipally. It's supported municipally, and they've already raised over, I mean, at the time I chatted with them, over 100 and some thousand pounds are already rescued. So those are two amazing resources, I think, for destinations. Canada is really doing some innovative things.
Okay, great. Let's get to one more question and then we'll move on to our future focused section. How can we avoid greenwashing when purchasing event materials? For example, I bought compostable name badges, but then realized they could only be composted in Europe.
Oh, hi, Sarah. I would say a big trick in materials is saying like percentage bio-based. If there's any percentage bio-based, if it, like they'll say 91% bio-based material, that means that 9% is plastic. And so you really want to make sure that anything you're buying is certified compostable, and anything certified compostable should be commercially able to be composted, but you also have to use a commercial composter. So
it literally says it on the label. Like if you just take the time to read the label, you should be able to see that outright. Is that a FDA requirement, or is it just a voluntary?
The thing is that there's legislation in the UK and various parts of the world protecting consumers from greenwashing, but in the US, it's really not that prevalent. So, even when I'm checking the specs on, an event, I will really literally have to go to the website and like scour to make sure that there's not 3% plastic, because it will upset the compost stream.
Okay. There's more and more, but as sustainability people are trying to hold accountable, have data, tell where things are sourced from, vendors should at this point be able to tell you the makeup and where things are coming from. So again, challenge them, ask them, make sure that this is abiding with the standards that you have in place. Yep.
And push your.
Yeah.
Donna, were you going to say something?
I think I have a little bit of a lag in my internet here, so I'm sorry if I'm talking over someone. I think that's the beauty of being a sustainability champion, is that, like I said earlier, I just haven't learned that yet. But we are the ones that have to push to ask the questions. That's why I love our partnership with Paige and Marley. We go to the experts. So we go to the suppliers that are doing those compostable name badges and saying, exactly what does this mean? And not be afraid to ask questions for fear that it's going to make us look less sustainable. We just need to be brave and to ask the questions.
Yeah, great point. Okay, anything else you want to add to that before we switch gears to our future focus? Okay. What do you think the future of sustainability looks like? Donna, how do you see it evolving over time? I'll start with you.
Such a great question that there's no one black and white answer to, right? I mean, everything is changing from day to day. And, I just, like I said, I listen to a lot of podcasts, a lot of webinars. Do we have any Coldplay or Billie Eilish fans out there? Are you watching what they're doing on their tours? They are prioritizing eco-friendly tours using electric vehicles, and they're offsetting their carbon emissions. And I think that's the future. Watch what the leaders are doing that, we watch and we listen to in music and in art. Billie Eilish is out there and she says right on her website, make a tour plan. That's what we all should be doing.
Yeah. So the next
making
3 to 5
a tour
years,
plan.
sorry.
Future. The future is, just continually learning what is out there and what we need to do. We have over the World Travel and Tourism Council says in 2024, there are 348 million jobs worldwide in the hospitality industry. Jobs like sustainability coordinator, green event planner, sustainability champion. That's the future. It's going to change as technology changes and AI gets into all of it. The future is what we have to stay up to date with as much as possible on. But it all goes back to making it personal, in my opinion. Who am I making the planet more sustainable for? Marley, I learned that from you when you told me about thinking about your son. What's the world going to be like for him when he's 21 years old? I see that now in our grandchildren. What are we leaving this world for? Are we going to do it perfectly every step of the way? Absolutely not. But if we all did what we could, then that becomes an impact on the future.
Love that, Donna.
Yes, I do too. I wanted to ask Paige, what do you think in terms of tools or innovations? Do you see anything coming or under development that will change the game for food sustainability and events?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times when people think about events or sustainability, it's, oh my gosh, this is so hard. This is going to take a lot of effort and a lot of labor. But there are so many technologies that are out there. Of course, I'm biased for one of them, but there's so many cool, innovative things coming up and that we're hearing about at conferences and that are changing the game in terms of not only making it easier to make the right choices, but also the data that you're getting back from it to actually improve the decisions for future events. So, and I really think with all of this, the future of sustainability, it's no longer going to be a nice to have. Right now, it's kind of some people are, some people aren't. We're trying to figure it out. Businesses are getting on board. Down the line, clients are already asking for this. Businesses are already adopting these sustainable practices. And one thing as you start to adopt these new tools and technology is to realize that it's easy. It's very rewarding. We talked about the morale of teams who are doing the right thing and seeing that they're giving it back and they're making an impact. So using this, which right now is actually a competitive advantage to be able to say that you are, take advantage of that before you have to when you're behind. So the future, this is going to be Yeah, in the future, it's going to be something that everyone's doing. Do it now. Get ahead of it. Use it as an advantage for you and your businesses and your clients who are asking questions to say, yes, we do this. Something that's interesting, I was reading a case study about this one event that it was a 3-day, 800-person event that had a footprint of 455 tons of CO2, which is more than almost 100 cars produced in a year. So in the future, I think not only will you have to be doing it, but we also owe it to the communities that are welcoming us into their neighborhood to host an event to be able to do it the right way and to be sustainable. So I think it's something that you got to get on board. It's now or never.
Yeah, that's a really interesting, those communities think, okay, great investment. They're all here. And yeah, the footprint we leave behind is pretty big. Marley, what are you seeing what's your vision for 5 years sustain an event? What does it look like?
Yeah, it's funny. I've had a couple of people tell me that I'm from the future. So I'm just going to pretend that we are in the future.
Great question then. I'm glad I asked.
I'll just tell you what's going on, So basically every event will be measuring attendee travel, and they're going to strategize on the lowest emission destinations for their group. Planners will be prioritizing destinations based on the renewable energy usage at venues and hotels, including the innovation and prioritization of battery-powered AV providers, which is what Billy and Coldplay are already doing. Food donation will be legislated and required at a government level, and composting will be mandated municipally as well. Plant-based menus will be the norm, with the difference in budget being used to support both food rescue and local community activation. Swag will shift from being, a purchase to philanthropic support of the community and local leaders. Events will start volunteering more time and really be more deeply connected to support these local communities with financial and in-person resources. Events design out their single-use everything, and unnecessary waste will be minimized so that local impacts are more acknowledged. And it'll be much more about prioritizing local artists, entertainers, elevating the local community via experience, and supporting local artist coalitions. Disposables won't exist anymore. Business models will have shifted. Companies that are extractive will no longer be in business, and happiness indexes will have increased. We will have reconnected more deeply to ourselves and to the earth.
Well, that is beautiful and so inspiring. Nice. And I love that. So are you seeing, half of those ideas in 5 years? Are you seeing all of those ideas taking shape? I mean, all of you, based on what you're seeing in the marketplace right now, and with legislation, and with, consumer demand and inquiries, some of those things that Marley referred to, how far out do you think those things are?
It's not that far out. We're already seeing it. There's legislation that's been passed mandating for businesses to compost, donate their surplus food, because it's impacting our emissions as a country. So, and this is, again, not just the United States, this is globally that we're seeing changes, and people are being held accountable. Businesses are being held accountable. Businesses want to make these changes. So it's here. It's already happening.
It's wonderful.
I agree.
Yeah,
I think that again, while things may have stalled in some areas, it's our responsibility to have the voice that we have when it comes to sustainability and to stand firm. I see in the chat that's Harvard Business Review published an article, Corporate Sustainability in Crisis. What should companies do now? Keep on. Figure out what it is that your sustainability statement is, and how it not only affects your manufacturing and what you do with your business travel, but your meetings and events. How you move it forward. We just have to keep on keeping on. And it's a broken record, I know, but we need to just keep in and bring the future to today. We're seeing things, but we all agree we're not where we want to be. Marley and I have been working together for 2 years now, and I thought maybe we would be much further than we are right now, but we've made great progress. We've made great progress at MNIW with our partnerships, with our suppliers, with our clients, bringing the knowledge to everybody and making everybody firm in their beliefs that sustainability is not going away. It's here.
Right. Yeah. Okay, I'm looking at the time. It looks like we have about 6 minutes. So I want to make sure we get one key takeaway from each of you before we wrap up. So Marley, I'm going to start with you. What is one key takeaway that you want to make sure that our viewers, our listeners can bring with them as they go about their day?
Great question. So I think that the chat also covered, should the planet be a mandatory stakeholder and shareholder in every board meeting to keep us going? And the answer to that is absolutely. And the thing that's interesting is a few years ago, there was a study of like the top 100 companies. And if there were a price on the natural resources they use, none of those companies would be cash positive or revenue positive. We don't actually take into account the environmental costs or the human or planetary well-being as a cost. Now, if those costs were actually, those are called externalities. If those were taken into account into business models, this is just something that could be legislated by any government at any time. Entire business models would collapse. So think about, the extractive nature of, businesses that you operate with, or things that you pay for as a consumer, and just kind of think about that as it relates to externality. And I kind of wanted to digress to that, but the other point is that leadership is not leading right now, and it's oftentimes a saying in the sustainability community: you need leadership buy-in top down. My call to action is that event planners are the experts in what you do. You are the experts in your operations. You know all aspects of what, the ins and outs of your choices. And I would say you can make a lot of choices without needing to change your budgets or without needing to do things differently, just by being an expert. So address the areas in which you can, and also take that leadership role upon yourself. And if you need help, you've got some people in your corner.
Absolutely. Paige, what would you say is one key takeaway?
Yeah, I think don't be afraid to challenge the status quo that a lot of businesses have right now. If you're a planner, challenge the venues that you're hosting. And MNIW does an incredible job with this. Challenge your staff, your colleagues, why you're doing things the way that you are, current practices that you might have in place that they can be improved. And one way I love doing this is the powerful 5 whys. I don't know if anyone's heard of this, but it's a really great technique to really get to the root of why something exists or why this is happening. And so as an example, and I'll use food recovery and what we had example as a myth earlier. So we can't donate surplus food. Why? Because my general manager told me that we couldn't. Why? Because it's a policy of our company. Why? Often then that's where you'll get to, let me check. I'm not sure why that's in place. And then it could be because we're afraid that we're going to be held liable and get sued as an organization. And then that's where there's this beautiful opportunity to grow and learn and change what may currently be in place and just isn't really relevant. And there's other things that they can do to be sustainable. So take that opportunity, challenge the status quo, hold your teams to these standards. If you're a venue, if you're a planner, don't accept no. Challenge your vendors to, when you're talking about packaging, answer that question. What is the sourcing of this? Can I recycle this? Hold everyone accountable, and also get that data back at the end of it so that you can grow and build these sustainability initiatives.
Great. Okay. Empower yourself as an event planner. Know that you have the ability to move that ball forward. Use the 5 whys. Love that. And Donna, what do you have for us?
I mean, it's all beautiful what you both just said. And I would just say, be brave. If in the future, our future families are looking back at this LinkedIn Live, I want us to be known as those that were brave, that we We're brave about what we did. We're not afraid to say why 5 times. We're not afraid to keep pushing it. Just be brave. You don't have to know everything. Lean into your suppliers, lean into your partnerships. That's what we're here for. We have one planet, and let's just be brave about what we're doing when it comes to the meetings and events industry.
Mhm.
And I think too, to just piggyback, like be really empathetic to yourself and where you might be psychologically relative to this topic. You know, loving ourselves and being really, really kind to ourselves is kind of like step one. You know, meet yourself where you are with kindness and don't be hard.
Mhm. Yeah, excellent point. All great, great takeaways. We have just about 1 minute left. So I want to thank you, the three of you for joining us today and just sharing your wisdom, your experience, and really your passion for this topic. I hope the viewers and the listeners have gotten a lot out of it. I know I certainly have great, great questions from our viewers today. Before we close out, we'd love for you to answer one quick final poll. It will pop up on as a QR code there. But Donna, Paige, and Marley, thank you again so much for joining us today. Also, don't miss our follow-up resource with links, stats. We've got suggestions from today's discussions. And if you didn't by chance opt in to receive our follow-up resource, but you still would like to receive that, go ahead and email me directly. That's S O'Neill, S as in Sam, O, N as in Nancy, EIL, at meetings-incentives.com. And I will get that over to you. So thank you everybody again for joining us today. Thank you panelists. You guys are amazing. And I think that's a wrap. So everyone have a wonderful day and thanks again. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.